Hello and welcome to the Shir on Daniel, the fifth chapter, Perek Hay, the writing on the wall.
We are recording this for Mr. Yossi Steinhardt, and I want to dedicate the learning Le'ilu Nishmas, those who passed away at Meron last week. Neshama should have an aliyah. So we're going to start the fifth parak, but before we start the fifth parak, we're going to do our recap of the book so far. So who wants to? We gave it to Charles last time. So who wants to start us off? That's okay, Charles. Well, he's noshing. So anyone else? Parak Aleph in Daniel. Any takers? Otherwise, I'll do it. Okay. So the first parak we saw Daniel and his friends who were captured by the Babylonians and imprisoned, and they were attempted to be force-fed the non-kosher food or the king's food, and Daniel refuses. He and his three friends, Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah, don't eat the king's food. They make this whole test, and they prove to their jailer that they can actually be healthier without the king's food, and they in fact are successful. So they don't eat, and instead are given seeds or some other, animal food. And they manage to not only make it through the gauntlet of being chosen to be part of the king's entourage, but they're actually promoted to the very highest levels. So that was Parak Aleph. Parak Bet. Daniel was the one who it was his idea not to eat, and he brought in Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah as well. Okay, Parak Bet. Any takers? The king has a dream?
That was the first dream that he had, and he challenged the necromancers and people to tell him what it was, the dream, and then to give an interpretation.
Right.
They tried to stall,
they couldn't do
it, and he thought he was going to kill them. And then Daniel came around, and he got permission somehow to get an extra day.
Mm-hmm.
He prayed to Hashem, I guess, and then that night he had he got the dream.
Right.
That,
and the interpretation.
And he came in and he told it to me.
Right. And what was the dream?
The statue.
Right.
Gold, silver, copper, and bronze.
Copper, iron, and clay.
And clay with mixture on the bottom,
right?
Right. Yeah, mixture.
Right. And then what happened to that statue?
Then something came and knocked it down.
Yes, giant boulder came. Correct. And then the interpretation
was that four kingdoms.
Four kingdoms.
And in the end, I guess
Hashem will send a final kingdom
to destroy him.
Right. Okay, that's Parak Bet. Very good.
I guess at the very end, he sees Hashem's the head. He believes in Hashem at the end?
Right, he bows down to Daniel, and you're super, amazing. You must have godly. Right. Position. Very good. Parak Gimel. Parak Gimel is the gold statue itself. Right. So Nebuchadnezzar builds a gold statue, 60 amos tall, 6 amos wide.
Everybody bow down, otherwise you're toast. We're not going to bow down. We don't care. Okay, we're chucking you in the fire. And apparently 3 go in, 4 come out.
3 go in, 4 are there, and 3 come out. Right, and that totally blows Nebuchadnezzar away. And
then he writes a letter.
Right, then he writes a letter, and the letter is about what happens to him in the fourth parak.
Mm-hmm.
Fourth parak? He has another dream.
I'm back. I had a dream. It was interpreted.
I'm a tree.
I lost my mind, and now I'm back.
Right. He has this dream about being a tree, and the tree is feeding everybody, and then they say, chop down the tree, and tie it up in irons, and then for 7 seasons something will pass over, and you'll be like an animal. And Daniel explains that Nebuchadnezzar is the tree, and that the reason this is going to happen is because he's so haughty, and Hashem is going to show him who's boss. And he's able to forestall that for a year by giving tzedakah at Daniel's suggestion. But eventually he slips. He talks about how great he is that he made Bavel, and look how awesome Bavel is. and so everything that it happened in the dream comes to pass in reality. And then Nebuchadnezzar ends by saying, this all happened to me, but I'm back, and God, the Jewish God, is the real deal, and everyone should be humbled before him.
At what point was he acting like an animal?
At the end of that, after he has the dream, when it actually comes to pass, what happens is he doesn't get cut down like a tree. He ends up going either becoming animalistic or losing his
Homeless.
mind or something. Right, homeless,
He lost the
thrown
kingship, they
into
said 7 years.
seven. Right, so it's
seven-
unclear exactly
yeah,
how much
right.
the psukim are sort of
Right.
intentionally unclear. They don't say shanim, they say adanim, which are like periods of time. It could be 7 months, it could be 7 years, it could be 70 years. But the common understanding is that it was 7 years that he was sort of out of it. One question we didn't quite address last time that I've seen raised in a few places is Nebuchadnezzar is a bad guy, right? He destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. He killed thousands upon thousands of Jews, enslaved and moved the rest of them out of Eretz Yisrael. He does like unspeakable things to the Jewish king. He kills his children in front of him, and then he blinds him, and bad stuff.
Which king?
Yehoiah,
No.
Tzidkiyahu, thank you, yes.
Yeah,
Right.
that was late.
Like, why doesn't God just kill him? Right? Why are we going through this whole? Okay, he'll turn into an animal, and then he'll recognize that God is
And
really
then
the
there's a
God.
Kiddush Hashem.
Right? Like, what's that about? Just get rid of the guy. He's not in the book anymore, right? After Parak Daled, there's no more Nebuchadnezzar anyway. So why does he kind of get off, with a slap on the wrist or a 7-year sabbatical rather than just knock him out? What do you think?
Well,
I understand the
Well,
question.
that's what we're discussing, like that the Neo.
Hitler turned around at the end of his life and said, you know what? Everything that I did was wrong. God is the real God. The Jewish people are the real deal. And everything that I did was screwed up. It wouldn't excuse what he did for sure, but it would certainly make a Kiddush Hashem on some level. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, if he repudiated everything that he did, and like, yeah, Nazis, what the hell are you guys doing? Like, I was a madman. Like, you shouldn't have followed me. The Jewish people should be exalted throughout eternity. I'm just saying, it would have been something.
Okay.
I'm not saying it would have been. I still would have held a grudge personally,
Right. I don't think it's ever enough.
Of
Like-
course, it's not ever enough, but it's something.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something to the recognition that that even the most evil person can come to a recognition of God.
Okay, but he did that. He sort of did that before too. Not enough.
Not enough.
What do you guys think?
I mean,
Fair question, unfair question.
I'm not sure. It's not sitting well with me because you're saying it's like almost like Horus, like just cut him off right now.
Yeah, he did something wrong. He starts exalting himself and saying, "I did all this. I'm the ruler of the world."
Why
So
why
zap.
doesn't he get whacked? Why doesn't he have a Sopranos-like ending?
I don't know. We don't.
I don't know
We
if
don't
that-
have so many cases where people's lives are cut short, right? It's not like sort of like the norm. The norm is that they sort of give them till their allotted time on this earth, and if he does, he does. If he doesn't, he doesn't, and then we'll see what happens in the next world.
Okay. Okay. In other words, he's
I'm
gonna get what's
trying-
coming to him.
I'm trying to think of a real public example of someone who was like, okay, destined to be for 80 years, and he just did this. Now he's like cut short at 40. I don't know. I mean, can you think of?
So, well, let me hold
Look,
that answer
King
until we get.
King Menashe did Avodah Zarah for like.
Yeah, he was a bad guy.
He was a bad guy, and you know what? When he decides to do tshuva in the crappiest way possible, Hashem drills the hole under his throne so that his tshuva can get there to show that hey, even the worst person can come back,
Okay.
and that there's a message there.
So one answer that I've heard that I appreciate, I think partly from Rabbi Torchiner, is there are a lot of parallels with Yetzias Mitzrayim, and God, showing Paro the error of his ways and having him say, no, Hashem is the tzaddik and I'm the one who messed up. But there's an aspect in Yetzias Mitzrayim where Hashem says, Es asher hisalalti b'Mitzrayim, that I made Mitzrayim into a joke, right? That for the Jewish people to ever feel free of their oppressors, it's not enough to just take people out of slavery. you have to sort of unmake the taskmaster. You have to show that there was nothing there of substance in the first place. Otherwise, they can have that slave mentality forever. Right. Making a joke out of Mitzrayim was part of what helped the Jewish people psychologically not feel enslaved anymore. And turning Nebuchadnezzar into an animal is, from my perspective, exactly that. You're this guy who was the king of the world is not just saying, okay, I messed up, I'm sorry, I'm wrong, you guys are right. He's a joke. He's an animal. Like he's literally admitting in public, oh yeah, I went and like grew my hair out and grazed in the fields and
dying at the top of his game is not enough.
Right. Dying at the top of his game is not enough. I like that. Okay, so let's, without further ado, we've had a lot of ado. Let's start Perek Hey, which is one of my favorite prakim in Daniel. This is a pretty famous one. I think we actually, many moons ago when we were doing the villains in Tanakh, I think we had Belshazzar as one of our villains. Okay, so Perek Daled commences as follows. So we're done with Nebuchadnezzar, and now we meet Belshazzar, who is ostensibly his son or grandson. Historically, they identify Belshazzar as actually the son of one of the kings that we don't mention in Tanakh. His name is Nabonidus. But whatever the case may be, he is a historical figure. So Belshazzar Malka Ovid Lechem Rav Ravranohi Aleph. So Belshazzar makes this huge meal for all the nobles. Ulakabel Alpha Chamra Shaseh, and in front of thousands of people, he's getting drunk. Belshazzar Omar B'te'em Chamra. So Belshazzar says, when he's good and drunk, Lahayasaya lemane dahava v'chaspa dihanpek Nebuchadnezzar havui min heichola dibiu shleim. Here's what we're going to bring out. Let's bring out all the gold and silver vessels that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, pillaged from the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. V'yishtum bahon malka ravonoi sheglita ulechenose. And then the king and the nobles and the concubines are going to drink from them. So these parties are well attested in historical record. Herodotus and other like ancient historians talk about the types of parties that the Persians would have, and essentially they would have like the dignitaries come in. They would be there with their wives. Then the wives would all leave. The concubines would come in, and everybody would get drunk, and debauchery would ensue. And that's what's going on over here, except that they're taking it one step further. And if this starts to sound like Achashverosh, that's very much intentionally so. So just like Achashverosh, when he's good and drunk, asks to bring out something, and Chazal say that the way he described it is the kli shani mishtamesh bo, the vessel that I use is more beautiful than everybody else's. Here we're talking about actual vessels. There he was talking about his wife. So ba'dayin hasiv monei dava di hanpiku min heichola de Beis Aloha di Yerushalayim, and they bring out the kalim of the golden kalim of the Beis Hamikdash, the ishtiv bahon malka v'ravonoi sheglato ulecheinose, and then all of the concubines and the nobles and everybody else start drinking from them and getting drunk. So ishtiv chamra v'shabchu la'Elohei dava v'chaspa nechosha parzula av avna. And once they're drunk, they start making toasts to their gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. They've got gods that span the metallurgic spectrum.
These kalim were they used to for
Avodas Hashem. Yeah.
Not like a standard goblet. I mean, whatever.
Right. It wasn't like they took out like the Kiddush cup. Right. They took out whatever they could find of the kalim of the Beis Hamikdash and used it to drink from. So Beishate Nafoka Etzbon Diyad Enosh. So just then, the fingers of a human hand appear. The kasvan lekabel nevroshta al gira de kosel heichola di malka. And they start writing on the plaster of the walls of the wall of the king's palace opposite the Nevroshta. They're not exactly sure what it means, but it's essentially the chandelier. Umalka chose pas yad di kosva. And the king sees this hand that is writing. Now, there are some academics who want to try and say that only the king saw it and nobody else saw it, and that's why you'll see in a minute no one can interpret what is written over there. It's highly unlikely just from the basic reading of the psukim, because they would say we don't see anything. it's not like the dream where he says, tell me what it is and then what it means. Everyone can see what's there, they just can't read it. We're gonna dive into that in a moment. So Adain Malka Zayohi Shanohi Virayanohi Yivhalune. So we've had this before. The king's face starts to contort, right? We've talked about what the king's face represents. The king is completely freaked out over here, which anyone would be if they've had a couple drinks and a disembodied hand starts writing on the wall. The Kitre Chartse Mishtarin, and he basically like starts losing control of his bowels. Varkuvase da nakshan, and this is a great image. His knees are knocking one into another. So Kare Malka Bechail. So the king cries out with a lot of strength. So what does every good Babylonian king do when he has no idea what's going on? Call forth the exorcists, the Chaldeans, the diviners. And the king of Bavel says, look, anybody who can read this thing that's on the wall and can explain what it is, Argevana Yilbash. So we're going to reward him. He's going to get clothed in royal purple clothing. Back then, purple was like the royal color that only royal people can wear. V'hamanika de dahava al tzavarein. He's going to get a special golden necklace. The talti malchusa yishlat, and he will rule over a third of the kingship. So this we've never had before in terms of carrot and the stick. Usually it's like, if you don't tell me, your house will be destroyed. Here it's all reward, and this last reward is that you will be in charge of a third of the kingdom, not in charge the way like a governor is in charge, but the talsi malchuse yishlat. You'll be almost like a king, right? Like a third of the kingdom is yours. So that's pretty high stakes in terms of the reward. But it doesn't seem to matter. So adayin olin kochach kime malka v'lo kahalin kasova lemikre upishu lehoda lemalka. So they all came and they tried to read. It's like the sword and the stone. They all line up and they try reading this thing on the wall, and no one is able to do it. And obviously they can't, they can't explain it to the king either. So you have in the Midrashim talk about like the guesses that they would try to throw out to the king, and it was kind of ludicrous.
It's like an Uber Eats order.
So what does every good Babylonian king do when his necromancers fail him? Call for the Jews. So Adayin Malka Belshazzar Sagi Mizbahal V'Zayohi Shanin Alohi, and of course this just makes Belshazzar 10 times more freaked out and upset. Ravanohi Mistabshin, and his the nobles who were there drinking with him are all bummed out. So Malkasa Lekabel Milay Malka V'Ravranohi. So because of what was going on with all of everyone being bummed out, so they call in the queen Lebeis Mishtaya Alice. She comes into the drinking room. Usually, this is actually the queen mother. So either it's Belshazzar's mother or his grandmother, but she's older, and she was around back in the good old days when Daniel was the guy that you called. So Ant Malkasa v'Amris Malkalam L'chaim. So she answers and says what everybody says to the king first, which is, King live forever. Al yivahaluch rayonach v'zivach al ishtanu. Don't be bummed out. Itai Givar Malchusach, the Ruach Aloin Kadishin Bay. There's this guy you have, tucked away somewhere in one of your cloistered ivory towers who has like godly wisdom. Uviome Avuch Nahiru V'Sachlasanu V'Chachmas Elohin Hishtachach Bay. And your father always used to use him. He's got like super awesome godly wisdom. Umalka Nebuchadnezzar Avuch, and your father Nebuchadnezzar the king, Rav Chartumin Ashbin Kazdoin Gazrin Hakime Avuch Malka. Your father set him up as like the head vizier. So the question that everyone asks is like, well, where did he go? Right?
And how long is the spread? How between?
Right. How many years has it been?
It's a long time because you have that other king in between.
Nabonidus, yeah. There's definitely So Nebuchadnezzar, when we say it's the father, it sounds like it's probably more likely the grandfather. and we talked a little bit about this last time. So Daniel becomes Hasach, he becomes demoted because he gave Nebuchadnezzar this idea of delaying or staving off the punishment by giving tzedakah. So Chazal didn't like that, and they said, who gave you the right to get involved in this? There was nothing in the dream that said, oh, by the way, give tzedakah and you kind of get a pass. That was Daniel's eitzah to a big Russia. So because Daniel got involved in that way, he got demoted. So that's why he's off, semi-retired. And now they've got to unretire him and bring him back to kind of figure this whole thing out. Kol kabel di ruach yatira umando v'sachlasonu v'pasher chelmin v'achvayas achidon umeshare katirin hashtachach be b'Daniel. So, since they figured that Daniel is obviously more intelligent than everybody else, Di Malka Samshme Belshazzar, Ka'an Daniel Yiskere Upisha Yahachave. So, and your father called him Belteshazzar. So we have Belshazzar the king and Belteshazzar the Daniel. Let him come and he'll explain everything that's going on.
Are they calling Daniel and Belshazzar?
So the queen mother is just mentioning to the king, there's Daniel. She named him Daniel in the last parak, and then she's like, you might not recall that name, but your father the king gave him this religious name, which Bel is one of the gods in the pantheon of Babylonia. So Belteshazzar is like God. Bel, the god, should protect the king. This is completely my own conjecture, and you can please feel free to discount it as you see fit. But the fact that Belshazzar and Belteshazzar have such similar names, to me, it sounds like the king named his son after Daniel. Right? Like he was so impressed with Daniel, he's like, I know what name to give him. I would love for my kid to grow up to be just like Belshazzar, so we'll call him Belshazzar. Otherwise, it's so weird that they have basically the exact same name.
Yeah.
The tet in the name, that's the only difference, doesn't make a difference in translation. That both names mean the same thing. So that's what they do. Badain Daniel hual kadam malka. So Daniel was brought before the king.
Not the opposite way?
Well, Daniel came before Belshazzar. Daniel's much older. So Ane Malka va'amr Daniel. So now let's hear how the two interact. It's very interesting. So the king says, kind of formally, Ant hu Daniel, dimin b'nei galusa Yehud. Are you this Daniel I've heard about, who came from the Jewish exile? Di haisi Malka avi min Yehud, that my father, schlepped you along. I guess I'll be happy to speak to you. Shamais alach di ruach Elohim bach. I've heard that you're a pretty smart guy. And you have all kinds of wisdom, and these are just various words for wisdom. So now I've got all these wise men, and none of them seem to be able to read this thing and explain it to me. They're not able to do it. So this is the situation, Daniel. There's this writing over here. I don't know what it means. No one else knows what it means. What does it mean?
The hand's gone.
The hand is gone, as far as we know. So you're bringing up a very important point, and you kind of scoop me on it.
We'll just intro to Daniel. Like the hand's still there. I would just like.
Yeah, Daniel's gonna look up and he's gonna go white with like, oh boy, you're screwed,
right.
dude.
Like not this whole, I don't need this whole.
Right. So as far as we know, the hand is gone. It doesn't say the hand is gone, but you have to assume it. Furthermore, you have to kind of telescope. This is all happening in one night, right? Like this is kind of a long process to all happen in one night. They got good and drunk.
The whole play is one act.
Right, one act exactly. They all got good and drunk. Then they have this terrifying experience. Then they call in all the interpreters as they're still, I guess, sitting there. The interpreters try
Maybe
for...
because they're wasted, they can't figure it out.
Right. The interpreters try for, I don't know, 15 minutes? They got to try for a while to kind of figure this thing out. They give up. Then the queen comes in, says, oh, by the way, we have Daniel. He's out, like, in the library somewhere studying. Haul him out of the base medrash. They bring him in, and then we have a whole conversation. We're kind of... Time has sort of stopped. So va'anashim esalach the tichul pishrin lemifshar v'kitrin lemishrei. You can explain all these kinds of problems. Ka'an hein tichul kasav lemikre upishulaho da'otani argavona tilbash v'hamanika didahava al tzavarach v'talsa b'melchusa tishlat. And there are fabulous prizes. You figure this out, and we've got, tell him what he's won. And he gives him, the whole rundown of what he could win if he's able to explain this whole thing. So Daniel says, no sweat. Notice now that he hasn't referred to him as Belshazzar, and Daniel doesn't refer to himself as Belshazzar either. So Ba'adayin ane Daniel v'amar kodam malka.
Maybe it's demotion.
What's that?
Maybe it's a demotion.
Maybe it's a demotion, or maybe he's kind of coming out of exile, right? The naming, changing the name was one of the things that made them feel like they're in exile. So Ba'adayin ane Daniel v'amar kodam malka masnasach lach lahavyan. You keep your presents. Univaz ba'yosach la'achron hav. Why don't you give those amazing, fabulous prizes to somebody else? Baram. However, kasova ekra lamalka upishra odiine. I'm more than happy to tell you what that thing on the wall. I got you. No problem. I can tell you exactly what that means. This isn't even one of those like, give me a day and let me have God kind of tell me what is actually going on over here. Remember, as we said before, he has no background. He wasn't there when the drinking was taking place, when the hand was taking place, when the knees knocking, and none of that. So, first says Daniel,
But
let's
it says
do.
I'll read the writings, and presumably the writings there.
Yeah, the writings there.
The writings there, maybe just not the hand.
So Daniel, in good Daniel fashion, first wants to give him a little bit of a musar shmuz. So Ant Malka Elohan Ilah Malchuse Revusa V'Yikre V'Hadra Yahav L'Nebuchadnezzar Avuch. O King, Most High God bestowed kingship, grandeur, glory, and majesty upon your father Nebuchadnezzar. Once upon a time, Umin Revusa Diavle Kolamayu Mayav Lishnaya Hava Zeirin V'Dachalin Mikadmohi. And he was exalted over all the other nations and languages. The Havatzave, Havekatel, the Havatzove, Havamoche. Anyone who he wanted to put to death would be killed, and anyone who wanted to let live. This is kind of like God, right? Mi Yechia, Mi Amus. That's Nebuchadnezzar, right? That's the level that he's at. V'di Havitzove, Havimarim, V'di Havitzove, Havimashpil, and whoever he wants to raise up will be raised up. Whoever he wants to lay low will be brought low. Uchdi Ram Livove. But when he got too full of himself, the Ruche Tikfas Lahadoza, Hanchas Min Karse Malchuse V'Yikore Heidiu Mine. So then he was deposed from his royal throne, and all of his glory was taken away. Umin bnei anosha tarid v'livvei im chevosa shaviv v'im aradaya midore isba kosrin yitamune umatal shmaya gishmei yitztaba. So this is just a recap of last parak, because you weren't there, Belshazzar, but he got turned into an animal, and he went and ate with the donkeys and noshed on grass. And was covered over with the dew of Shamayim. Adioda di shalid Eloha ila'a b'malchuse anasha ulaman di yitzbe yahakim Allah. Until he realized that it's actually God that runs the world. Newsflash, king who's standing here holding the kalim of the Beis HaMikdash and looking like a fool. God actually runs the world, the God that you're in the middle of mocking, and he set your father straight after he turned him into an animal. So you might want to just be mindful of that. But Aunt Beret,
risky,
yeah, stupid move. This, sorry,
No, but Daniel, I'm saying.
Oh yes. Stupid move for Belshazzar. Very, very.
Let's just say risky. Let's say
risky.
risky.
Yeah,
theoretically,
it's brazen, right? The first part we kind of skipped some of the important parts, so let's go back. First of all, he doesn't even accept the gifts.
No, let the king live forever.
No.
No, just, hey, by the way.
Right. He's like, keep your crap. Not interested. Which you don't say that. The king says, figure this out and I'll bestow. Great, bestow.
Right.
Do all of the bestowing. No. He's like, you can keep whatever it is you think you're going to give me, and we'll see why he tells him to do that in a minute. And then he gives him, he like basically cuts him down. Don't you know, like, what you're doing is complete insanity? And this is Daniel talking to the king without any fear whatsoever. The other thing that I neglected to mention.
You didn't see the fear. If he was in the room when the hand's writing and he sees a little fear. Okay, it's okay that It's
Right.
sort of like it's a moment I can take advantage of. He wasn't there. This
Right.
is sort
This
of in
is-
past probably. Now it's just like
Yeah,
the factors and
you've
doing
got to
the
assume Belshazzar is not too drunk anymore,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
He's of sound mind about.
He might still be terrified. I mean, look, I don't know, like,
Yeah, after he's finished scooping the poop out of his pants, then maybe he
Yeah.
like.
Right. If you
He's
lose
still the
your-
king.
Yeah, but,
Yeah.
bring me my brown pants.
Right.
Like,
One thing I neglected to mention. So why are they having this party? We last parak was Nebuchadnezzar, and then suddenly we walk into Belshazzar's like, let's have a party.
Yeah, I know.
It's Hanukkah.
The Gemara in the Megillah
Not Hanukkah, Gemara Megillah.
says that it was similar to Achashverosh later, but he thought he counted the 70 years from the beginning of Belshazzar, from the beginning of Nebuchadnezzar's reign,
Correct.
and then
Very
it was
good.
this
What is it?
Nebuchadnezzar was a whole bunch of years, and then this other king, and then him, and he thought the 70 years was over. That's why he said bring out the
Right. Excellent.
yeah.
Excellent.
Right.
So everyone, the Jewish people and the non-Jewish people know that Yirmiyahu gave a prophecy. The prophecy was the Jewish people are going to be in exile for 70 years. After 70 years, they'll be redeemed. So Belshazzar is the first of several people that we will meet who miscalculate when those 70 years are supposed to be up. Achashverosh is another. There's one more. The book is named after him. We'll get to that in like the 9th parak, but Daniel also can't figure it out. So because no one knows when to count from. Do you count from
the day the building falls.
do you count from the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash? Do you count from when Nebuchadnezzar is the first Babylonian king becomes king? Because it says that Babylon will have a kingship for 70 years. Do you count from the first time a Jew was exiled from Eretz Yisrael, which was Gerish, Cheresh, Umazger? The 10 tribes are sent away first before the Malchus Yehuda is sent away. So there's many different epochs, the stages that you can count from. No one really knows. They make their own calculation, and when their calculation is like up, so let's celebrate. That's it. The Jews are not going to be redeemed because the 70 years are up. So that's sort of background for the whole parak.
People always make mistakes on the counting, on the calculations, right?
Yes.
Except Stryker.
The-
Purim Fest, 1946.
That's an important point. What that really says to you is that the number is almost unimportant. Hashem can redeem people at any time. Like the Jews are going to be in exile for 400 years in Mitzrayim, except that it'll be 210 years. We'll figure out a way to we'll calculate from Yitzchak. I don't know why. We'll figure out a way to get you your 400 years. Don't worry. The point is, it's a finite amount of time, and you can mess with it depending on how the people behave. Right? The 70 years could have been up much earlier or much later. It depends on the people. So va'ant berei Belshazzar lo hashvelta livavach kol kabel di kol deno yadas. You should have known all of this, Belshazzar, and you should have walked a little more humbly like the duck. And instead, you're out here doing the following: Ve'al mori shemaya hisromamta ulamanoye divese hasiv kadamach. You exalted yourself over Hashem, and you brought out the vessels of the Beis Hamikdash. Va'ant v'rav ravanoch sheglosach ulechenosach chamra shasin bahon. And you started drinking in the cups, the utensils of the Beis Hamikdash. Ve'aloha kaspa v'dahava nachosho parzalo a'ol v'avna dilo chazin v'lo shamin v'lo yadon shabachta. And you started praising the gods of gold and silver and copper and stone and wood and everything else that Daniel was not there for. He's calling Belshazzar out on all this. And these are all gods that don't hear you, right? You're praising the gods of stone who have, that's not a real thing, right? And to the God who your very breath is in his hand. It's a beautiful image. And everything that you conduct in your life is his lohidarta. You didn't pay any attention to him. You didn't glorify HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bad move. Vadai min kadmohi shliyach pasa diyada v'kasava danar rishim. And therefore Hashem made this hand appear and make this writing that you see etched on the wall. And one of the things I should mention: why did we have to say that the writing is opposite the chandelier? Any takers? So it would be impossible for somebody to do that and not be noticed. It's not like someone could have come in and scrawled that somewhere, and we were all kind of wasted and we didn't notice. Like little Johnny came and wrote on the wall. No, it's up in a way where it would have been impossible for someone to do that. So this is clearly a miraculous thing. Udina kasava dirishim, and the moment you've all been waiting for, here's what it actually said. It said, Mene tekel ufarsin. What does that mean? It means Mene tekel ufarsin. Okay. So this is the interactive portion of our show. Sorry, Yossi, but you can Google Rembrandt's Writing on the Wall. If you haven't seen it before, this is Rembrandt's take. We can just pass this around.
Because it's vertical.
Okay.
That's why they couldn't figure it out.
So we're gonna get to. There's a number of different shitas on what was written and why they couldn't figure it out. But there you've got the
It's probably like a mirror.
It's like Scrabble style. It's crossword style.
right. So Rembrandt had a Jewish friend. He wrote the Conciliator.
No.
Menashe ben
Sforno.
Yisrael. No. Menashe ben
Sforno?
Yisrael. Menashe ben Yisrael.
Oh.
Who he actually did a painting of him, which is pretty striking. So what you saw over there, if you look at the words, Mamtus, Nikfi, whatever, right? You see how if you read it across, it's illegible. If you read it, like Charles said, up and down, then you get the words Mene Tekel Ufarsin, kind of, follow that along. So the Gemara has a number of different opinions as to what, that's pretty easy to read. I mean, it's not like super encrypted. Right, it's a word jumble, but instead of reading it that way, you read it that way. Why couldn't all the exorcists and Chaldeans, why could they figure that one out? That's not like a super hard.
Sources and all the kings.
Right, not a super hard one.
These are, I guess, the simple Aramaic words.
Yeah, right. So okay, let's explain what each word means. Mene so mene means to count, right? The one of the coins in the time was a mana. Takel, right. That's with an aleph, but yeah. So takel is like mishkal, means to weigh, like a shekel, right? A shekel is a weight of money. And then ufarsin paras is like pras b'shachris or pras bein arbaim. It means to like a portion, like cut it in half. We have yachatz, right? The Gemara says derech ani beprusa. That an ani eats, a poor person eats like broken up pieces of bread. They don't eat a nice whole piece of bread, right? So these are very simple Aramaic words. There's no reason. Now, what that means, okay, maybe that's a little bit harder, but at least you could read what it says over there. So the Gemara, the picture that I showed you colors this a little bit, pun semi-intended. One of the opinions in the Gemara is exactly that it was written vertically, and that's why they couldn't read it. Another opinion in the Gemara is that it wasn't written in the Assyrian script. There are two scripts, right? The Ksav Ashuri, right? Ksav Ashuri, which is what we have in our Sefer Torah now, and Ksav Merubah, which is the older script. It's actually maintained by the Samaritans. If you come to the shir on Ezra on Shavuos, little plug, we go into the Samaritans, but maybe the reason was they just couldn't read the font, right? They'd never seen that font before. There are other opinions in the Gemara that it was written in Atbash or some other cipher where you'd have to switch some letters around. Whatever it is, Pig Latin, right? So those are the reasons that maybe they weren't able to read it. But now Daniel's going to tell you what it means. So Dina Pshar Milta. Here's what it means. Mene, counted. So Mana Eloha Malchusa V'Hashlama. God has counted the days of your kingdom, and they are up. Time's up. Tekel. That means Tekilta b'moznayim. You were weighed on the scales of Ishtacha Chasir, and you were found to be lacking. Peres. That means Prisas Malchusach V'Ahivas Lamada Uparas. Your kingdom is going to be chopped up, and it's going to be given over to Persia and Media. That is what was written on the wall. That is what it means. And bad news for you, King Belshazzar. Now, he doesn't tell him when this will happen. Usually when words are repeated, it means like we had in Paro's dream, right? It was repeated to tell you it's going to happen soon. So, mene, we have it there twice to tell you like this is imminent, So Badayin Omar Belshazzar. So the second Belshazzar hears that. So v'halbishu Daniel argavona v'hamnika didahava al tzavare. He keeps his word. The man is good to his word. He got bad news. He got bad news told to him in a super rude way by this old-timey Jew, and he immediately keeps his word. He gives him the purple, which Daniel didn't want, right? Daniel's like, no thanks. He's like, yeah, I don't care. He dresses him in purple. He gives him the gold necklace. V'achrizu alohi tilahave shalit talasa b'malchusa, and it's announced that he is the ruler of a third of the kingdom of Bavel, which is kind of
Jewish quarter?
what's that?
The Jewish quarter?
Well, it's sort of a sucky gift because the kingdom of Bavel lasts for one more pasuk. Be Belelia ketil Belshazzar malka kazdoi, and that night Belshazzar is knocked off, and thus ends the reign of Belshazzar and the reign of Persia. And next we
Well,
get
that's Babylon's the reign of Babylon, right?
the reign of
Persia
I'm sorry,
takes
yes,
over.
right, no, excuse me, yes. The reign of Babylon is over. The next king we have is the king of Media, Madai, and then we're going to get the king of Persia after that. The Medrash tells a very interesting story about how Belshazzar was killed. Any takers on this one? So so Belshazzar goes to bed that night. Remember, this is all like one act play. Very perturbed, and he tells the guards at his door, "Don't let anybody in here. I don't care if they tell you they're the freaking king. Nobody gets in. Anyone tries to get in, off with their head." Unfortunately, after drinking all night long, Belshazzar has to use the commode, and there's no indoor plumbing. So in the middle of the night, he sneaks out to go use the bathroom, comes back, and Darius, who's one of his two guards, is standing at the door, and he's like, "Who are you?" It's the night. There's no lights, and I'm the king. What are you? Well, if I remember correctly, somebody told me that if anyone tries to come in, even if it's the king, off with his head. So they chop off Belshazzar's head, and that is the end of Belshazzar. And next week we have Darius the Mede, who we will get to meet.